Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to another Mystery Monday. How are you guys? I hope you all had the best weekend. And if you're new here, welcome. We talk about true crime cases on Mondays here. So if that's something you're interested in, then please come and join us and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Today, we're going to be talking about the case of Maryanne Murphy. And this case took place in Humble, which is in Texas. It all unfolded in 2012 when 911 operators received a call from a frantic 16-year-old girl whose home was being invaded. But this case would turn out to be much more than just a home invasion. Before we do get into the case, I just quickly want to thank my tried and true NordVPN for sponsoring this video. You guys know if there is one thing I can recommend to you, it is NordVPN. I have been using them for years now before they ever even reached out to me. I think having a VPN is one of those things that you just kind of forget about or you don't think you really need, but trust me, it's not. I recommend NordVPN to all of my friends and family. There are just so many benefits. First of all, little tip for you guys, the books are actually cheaper on Kindle Australia. And not only that, but you get to read the books sooner. So when Onyx Storm came out, I got to read that the night before all of my friends in London because Brisbane is 9 hours ahead of London. So it came out sooner for me. Also, when you travel, I'm watching The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills right now, which is so good. I'm watching it on Now TV. And when I went to Copenhagen recently, they don't actually have Now TV there. So the only way I could continue watching it was by putting my VPN on. So I could get on Now TV and keep watching my show. I'm able to access news articles and documentaries that aren't available in my country to be able to research these videos. And you also never have to worry about public Wi-Fi, scammers, phishing links, malware, any of that kind of stuff because NordVPN protects you from all of that nasty stuff. So make sure you guys check them out. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee. And if you go to nordvpn.com/bellafiore, you can also get a huge discount on the purchase of a 2-year plan and an extra 4 months free as well. I will leave all of the information for that in the description box down below, so make sure you check that out and let's go ahead and get into today's case. So Maryanne Murphy was born on the 26th of September in 1964 in Houston, Texas, to parents Jimmy and Nelda Allen. By 2012, she was living in Humble, Texas, which is a pretty small city just north of Houston, which had a population of just over 15,000 people at the time. She lived there with her husband Don and then also their 2 children, Scott and Kerry. And Mary and Don were typical opposites attract sort of situation. He was known to be a bit of a bad boy. He was involved in street racing. He got into fights, so he was occasionally on the wrong side of the law and got into a little bit of trouble. And Maryanne was a country girl. Her father was a police officer who ran a pretty tight ship, and everyone that knew her described her as being a strong woman with strong values that she stuck by. So very much opposites attract, and they were best friends. They bonded over their strong values and their love for their children. Maryanne worked for the Department of Public Safety. By 2012, she'd actually been working there for 28 years, and Don worked as a machinist. They didn't have the most glamorous life, but what they were rich in is what mattered most, which is love. Everybody that knew Maryanne seemed to love her. They said she was funny, she was sarcastic, and just a really sweet, kind woman. They said she was warm, she was loving, and she was caring, and she was a very accepting person. She welcomed people into her home with open arms. Her kids' friends were particularly fond of her and even said she was like a second mum to them. She was always described as being very motherly. She was a great mum to her own children as well, of course. She gave them everything they needed to succeed in life, and this was one of the traits that people admired most about her. Honestly, everyone just spoke so highly of her, and in all of the photos of her, you could just tell she seems like the sweetest woman, and she just has such a friendly smile. She had the perfect balance between being a friend and companion and also being a mum to her children. So she was able to discipline them when necessary, and she really tried to instill those core values that she had that she learned from her parents. Unfortunately, in the early hours of the 16th of July, 2012, tragedy struck the Murphy household. Just after 1 a.m., the family's 16-year-old daughter, Carrie, called 911 in a panic.
Okay, ma'am, what's your name?
Carrie Murphy. All I did was hear my mom scream, "Stop, stop, stop."
Okay, but did they break in or did they just come in?
I broke in.
As you can hear from the phone call, Carrie was in hysterics as she told the operators she had heard the back door of their house get kicked in, followed by her mother's screams. And as soon as she heard her mum screaming, she ran out of the house and to a neighbor's house so that she could get help and call 911. She was terrified thinking about what had happened to cause her mom to scream like that, and she was in just such a state of panic because she didn't know what was happening in the home and what state her home would be in and what state her mum would be in. So when the police went to the home, they had no idea what to expect. They had no idea if the attacker was still going to be in the home when they got there. They had no idea what the extent of Maryanne's injuries might be. All they knew is that a 16-year-old girl and her mum had been the target of a brutal home invasion, and that time was of the essence. Deputy Constable Hooper was the first deputy on the scene, and he met another deputy there, and together they made their way through the side gate around to the back of the house, and they noticed that 2 windows at the home were broken and the back door was also open, and so they made their way in through the back door. They carefully made their way through the house, and as they did that, there were no signs that the intruder was still in the home. Eventually, they made their way through to the main bedroom of the home, where they found 48-year-old Maryanne Murphy lying dead in her bed. She had been brutally murdered, and she was covered in blood and lacerations. Her 16-year-old daughter, Carrie, was placed in the back of a police car until deputies had, a bit of time to actually come and question her in depth about what she had actually witnessed. Neither Don nor Scott had actually been home at the time of the home invasion. They had both been working night shifts. So Scott, who was 21 years old at the time, he had been working at the airport doing electrical repairs, and he got a call from his sister, Carrie. This call was before investigators or deputies had even gone and discovered Maryanne's body in the bedroom. He got a call from his sister basically saying that there was a home invasion, and immediately he dropped everything and he raced home. And on his way home, he also called his dad, Don, and he told him everything that he knew, which honestly wasn't much because Carrie didn't know much. She didn't even know that her mum had been found dead at this point. She just called her brother. She said somebody broke into the house and that their mum might be hurt, and that was all that she knew. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody in the family knew that Maryanne was actually dead and had been murdered. So when Scott gets to the house, there's 15 to 20 cop cars there, and so immediately he knows that something really bad has happened, but he's not allowed into the home because it's an active crime scene. Obviously they can't just let him into the house, but they're also not updating him on what's going on. He's saying he wants to talk to his mum, he's saying he wants to talk to his sister, and they're just not letting him do that, and they're not updating him on what's going on. Everybody in the family at this point is in the dark about the state that Maryanne is in. Carrie ran out of the house when she heard her mum screaming to go and get her help. So she knew, and they knew, that her mum was probably hurt, that she had had harm come to her, but everybody in the family was in the dark. They're all freaking out. They all are just in such a state of adrenaline and emotion. And so Scott ends up getting a little bit aggressive towards some of the officers on the scene, which, it's not the right way to act, but I do think it's understandable in this case because you never know how you're going to react in a situation like this. All he knows is his mum is hurt, and nobody's letting him see her. Nobody's letting him see his sister. Nobody's telling him anything. So he's just freaking out and he gets aggressive. They actually have to restrain him. So they handcuffed him and put him in the back of a police vehicle because he did get aggressive and he got physical with one of the officers. And again, I just want to preface, I really don't think anyone can blame him in this situation. His emotions were running all over the place, and he just wanted to know that his family was okay and that they were safe. So shortly after all of this, Don arrived on the scene, and he was given the heartbreaking news that his wife, Maryanne, had been murdered. He was dealing with so much at this point because not only was he just informed that his wife, his best friend, the mother of his children, was dead and had been not only dead, but was brutally murdered, but his son is handcuffed in the back of a police car, and he has to deal with that, and he has to deal with breaking this news to both of his children as well. He has to go and he has to inform both Scott and Carrie that their mother has been murdered, and he has to deal with everything that comes with that. And it hit the family so hard because it was just such a tragic loss, but it was also so unexpected and abrupt. An autopsy revealed that Maryanne had been stabbed a total of 73 times. She was deaf in one ear, which likely would have made it a lot easier for an intruder to sneak up on her and attack her that way driveway, which is what detectives believe happened. It was a brutal, brutal scene. There was just blood all over Maryanne, and the viciousness of the attack really indicated that this was a crime of passion. This was a crime of hatred, because you don't stab someone 73 times to just kill them. The sheer number of wounds indicated that whoever committed this crime had a severe hatred towards Maryanne. The blood had also largely been contained to the bedroom, which also indicated that some thought had been put into this murder. Her daughter Carrie was finally taken to the police station. So she's been in the back of this police car at the scene this whole time, basically just waiting until someone had some time to come and actually question her and get some details from her. So she's finally brought to the station for questioning, and of course she is hysterical the whole way throughout this questioning, but she's very forthcoming and she really tries to recount as much of what she witnessed as she can. So she explained that she had been asleep and she was actually woken up by her mother's screams, and she could hear her mother screaming repeatedly, "Stop," and screaming, "Help me." Obviously, this was a terrifying thing to wake up to, and so she grabbed a knife that she kept hidden in her room, and she just kind of hid in her room holding this knife for a few minutes. And during this time, she said that she overheard a male voice tell her mum to shut up, and at one point she also heard footsteps running. She was frozen in fear at this point, and she didn't know what to do because she didn't have a phone to call 911 because her phone had been taken off her by her mum because she was grounded at the time. So eventually she gets the courage to leave her room and she's calling out her mum's name. Her mum didn't respond, and so she runs out of the house to try and get help. As she runs out of the house, she slips on a piece of paper. So she picks it up, she grabs it, and she just keeps running to the neighbor's house where she called 911. Now, when she got a chance to look at this piece of paper that she had slipped on, it actually had the name or the address of the Murphy house, and it also had a list of hours that Maryanne would be home. Detectives also actually found, during their search of the home, another note on the kitchen benchtop, which read, "Good luck in court without your mum, bitch." Carrie didn't know about this message, right? She had been running out of the house. She wasn't looking for notes on the kitchen benchtop, but detectives had seen it and they brought it up with her in her interview. And she said that it was likely referencing her traffic court hearing, which she was meant to be attending that same day. So according to Carrie, she had been involved in a car accident just a few weeks before her mum's murder. And this man kind of collided with her and she was given a ticket for an unsafe lane change. She also told police that this wasn't actually the first interaction that she had had with this man that collided into her car. She had also seen him a couple of times before, so she had been getting lunch with her mum and this man was at the same restaurant just staring her down. She also said that she had been home scrapbooking and she noticed this same car's headlights driving back and forth past her house, and obviously she was weirded out by this. She went and looked through the window and she noticed that it was the same blue pickup truck that was just driving back and forth past her house. Maryanne had been home at the time that this was happening, so Carrie went and she told her mum about it, but Maryanne really wasn't too concerned. So instead, Carrie went and told her brother Scott. He was due to start work, so he went and he sat in the driveway for 15-20 minutes, but by the time he went out and sat in the driveway, they never saw this blue truck again. Carrie couldn't say for sure who this guy was, and she couldn't say for certain who would want to harm her family because by her own admission, she had no enemies. Her mum had no enemies, and she also described herself as a very nice person. Obviously, this is super early in the investigation, so police are definitely going to try and track this guy down, figure out what's going on, but they also want to continue questioning friends, family, colleagues, just try and figure out who might have a motive to want to kill Maryanne. As they continued their investigation as well, they also combed through the scene of the crime, so the home, the Murphy home, and in Maryanne's bedroom under her pillow, they found a semi-automatic handgun, which wasn't actually that shocking that they found this handgun. They knew that Maryanne knew how to use a gun. They knew that she kept a gun to protect herself. But what was weird about it was the fact that it was under her pillow. According to her son Scott, she always kept this gun above the headboard. So the fact that it was under her pillow was definitely kind of weird. And then also, as they continued going through the crime scene, they realized that there were a lot of things at this scene that really didn't add up. So So the windows at the back of the house that had been smashed in, that I mentioned earlier, the holes in them weren't big enough for an intruder to have climbed in through the window. And they also weren't positioned, the holes in these windows weren't positioned anywhere near where they could kind of reach in and open a door. There was also glass on both the inside and the outside of the house from where this window was smashed, and there was a brick which was on the dining room floor inside the home. Now, if the brick had been thrown from the outside into the home to try and gain access into the home, most of the glass, you would think, would be on the inside of the house. But this wasn't the case. In fact, most of the glass was actually on the outside of the house. And this indicated that the brick had been thrown outside first from inside the house, and then it had been thrown back into the house to maybe try and stage the scene. According to Carrie, she also heard the intruders enter through the back door, but there was no signs of forced entry through the back door. So that meant that the intruder must have had a key, or somebody let them in, or the door had simply been left unlocked. What was also weird was this note that was left on the kitchen counter saying, "Good luck in court without your mum." First of all, what would the mum have to do with the court hearing? It's a traffic violation. Second of all, why would this guy, if he was the guy who collided with Carrie's car, if he was responsible for this home invasion, why would he leave a letter that made it obvious that it was him, that he was responsible for this? The letter was also handwritten, so it can easily be matched to a suspect. And then also the counter, which separated the kitchen from the dining room, it had a bunch of stuff on it which had just been kind of pushed off onto the floor. And this was really weird because Carrie, from her story, she hadn't been involved in any type of altercation, right? She just kind of legged it out of the house. And Maryanne was killed in her bedroom. There was no indication that there was any struggle. In fact, it looked like she had been killed in her sleep. So what would have possessed this intruder to murder Maryanne and then just go around and start trashing the place? In the eyes of the lead detective on the scene, Detective Juan Villamontes, he believed that it looked like the scene had been staged and that Maryanne knew her killer. As detectives started to take a closer look at people in her life, they started to realize that her husband Don maybe wasn't the friendliest of men. He wasn't unfriendly necessarily, but one of Carrie's friends had described him as rough around the edges, and another had said that he was quite strict. They also learned that his relationship with Maryanne was going through a bit of a rough patch, and they actually weren't even sleeping in the same room at the time. So he had been dealing with alcoholism, which is something that he had been dealing with for quite some time, but I think it had recently gotten a lot worse. So it was clear that there were some issues in the relationship, but this didn't make him a murderer, and his son Scott certainly didn't seem to think so. He said that although they were going through a hard time in their relationship, that Don just adored Maryanne, he loved her, and he would never do anything to hurt her. But then according to Deputy Hooper, when Don arrived at the crime scene after he was called by his son, he just wasn't acting in the sort of way that you would expect someone to react when they find out that their wife is dead. He was just apparently very overly calm. But again, I just feel like it's really hard to judge somebody's reaction to something like that. He also had 2 children who didn't know their mum was dead, and so he knew that he had to be strong for them, and he had to also inform them of their mother's murder. Both he and Scott gave interviews to the police. They provided their whereabouts, they provided fingerprints, and they weren't ruled out completely as suspects, but they were free to go. After their release, Scott said that Don just seemed really lost, that although he wasn't the best husband at times, he was completely devastated by the loss of Maryanne, and he even said that Don had said to him in tears, quote, "I can fix a lot of things, but I can't fix this." So while Don and Scott were free to go, they still had more to ask Carrie. They had more questions for her now than before, because now that they've looked through the house and they've looked through the crime scene, things in her story aren't adding up. She was very adamant in her 911 call and also in her interview with police that the intruder broke in through the back door. But this didn't make any sense because there was no signs of forced entry in the back door, and the windows that were smashed, they were too far away from the back door for the killer to have been able to reach in through the window and open the back door. It just wasn't possible. And then also what was fishy is that during the 911 call, she had been so adamant and so certain that they had broken in through the back door. But now during questioning, she was just kind of acting clueless about the whole thing. During her interrogation, she also said that she didn't hear the window smashing because she had her music turned up loudly, even though apparently she was asleep and she woke up to hear her mother screaming. Now she's saying that she didn't even hear the window smash because of her music, but she could hear her mother screaming. Police also spoke to some of the neighbors, and they are not even in the same house, and they were able to hear the window smashing. That's how loud it was. And they also said that within 15 seconds of hearing that window smash, they saw Carrie come running from the backyard of the house. When investigators confronted Carrie with this information, she actually couldn't explain it at all, and she just said that the neighbors must be mistaken. Now, obviously, by this point, police are thinking she's looking a little bit suspicious because not only is her story not making sense, but also when they arrived to the scene and discovered Maryanne's body, the blood had actually already begun to dry. And this threw Carrie's whole timeline into question because there's no way she hears her mum scream, she runs out of the house, calls 911, they arrive shortly after, and the blood is already drying. Another one of the neighbors also said when they saw Carrie run out of the house that she actually had a mobile phone on her. And if you remember, she said that the reason she couldn't call 911 from her house and she had to run to the neighbor's house is because her phone had been confiscated by her mum because she was grounded. Police obviously brought this up with her, and when they brought it up with her, her excuse was that it was a phone that her mum didn't know about, and so she didn't want to risk getting in trouble by using the phone, and that's why she ran to the neighbor's house, which to me, I don't know about you guys, but surely you would be willing to get in trouble for having another phone by calling 911 to potentially save your mother's life. You hear someone break in and you think, oh no, I can't call the police because my mum doesn't know I have this phone. It sounds absurd. Then as her investigation continues, it really doesn't seem like police are getting anywhere with her. They're just, honestly, more questions are being raised by anything she's saying in this interrogation. And then eventually, she does a complete 180. She breaks down and says she knows who the killer is, and it's a guy named Zayn. So she tells detectives that the reason she didn't tell them about this guy earlier is because she was scared that if she did, Zayn would actually come and hurt her as well. This is the first time detectives have even heard of this guy. He has not been on their radar whatsoever, but Carrie is saying that Zayn is her stalker. She said that he had broken in with a masked male accomplice to murder her mother, but she didn't know who this accomplice was. After Zayn killed her mum, she said that he pinned her up against a wall, he put a knife to her throat, and said that if you tell anybody that he would kill her. He also told her to make it look like a robbery. He threw the brick through the window and he put the note in her hands, and then he left. So after hearing this, police were quick to identify this guy as 20-year-old Zayn Ahmed. He was actually a guy who used to go to Carrie's school, Chester W. Nimitz Senior High School. He and Carrie had met at school, and Carrie alleged that they had known each other for about 3 years, and he had been interested in her romantically, but the feeling wasn't mutual. Now, police, obviously, they still took her story with a little bit of a grain of salt because she had already lied to them completely once, and now her story had done a total 180. It was completely different from her first story. I mean, it made sense to them why she had changed the story, but they just still needed to verify what she was saying. So they went to her dad, Don, and he agreed or gave them permission to do a polygraph. The results to her polygraph came back to say that she wasn't being truthful. So detectives keep questioning her. They're trying to get to the bottom of this story. They know that, she's obviously been threatened by this guy, so she's probably just kind of scared. So they're trying to get the full truth out of her now. As they were doing so, her story just kept changing. It kept getting more convoluted. She was now saying that Zayn and his accomplice had picked the lock. And she was also now claiming that she did actually witness the attack on her mother and tried to even intervene at one point.
I grabbed my knife and I ran in her room. And this guy grabbed me.
Which guy?
The guy that I didn't recognize. And Zayn and my mom. He was struggling and fighting her and kept pushing her down.
So she had heard her mother calling her name, and so she grabbed her knife, she ran to her mother's bedroom, and when she got in there, Zayn's masked accomplice grabbed her and restrained her. And while she was being restrained is when Zayn brutally murdered her mother right in front of her very eyes. Despite this story, police are still skeptical of her, of course, because her story just keeps changing and evolving, and they start to believe that she may have actually played a part in the murder because they end up finding out that Carrie and Maryanne actually didn't have that good of a relationship.
How do you think your mom is reacting right now to you? Mad? Why would she be mad at you?
Because I didn't help as much as I could have.
Because you didn't want to.
Part of me did.
You didn't want to.
Part of me did, part of me didn't.
Now, this admission is really kind of the turning point in this investigation because police start to realize that they are actually starting to get the truth out of Carrie.
Were you generally mad at your mom about something?
Yes.
What were you mad about your mom?
The fact that she tried to control my life.
Okay.
And everything I did, she called me stupid or dumb or told me I wasn't good enough.
Her and her mum weren't getting along at the time of the murder. She admits that. She felt like her mum was controlling her life. And she said that Maryanne would often call her stupid, call her dumb. She would tell her that she wasn't good enough. And so Carrie actually let these two men into the house to show her mum a lesson. So they were meant to just come in, bang on the walls a little bit and scare her. They weren't meant to kill her. They weren't meant to harm her. They were just meant to scare her and teach her a lesson.
I let them in because they said they were going to bang on the wall and scare her and then run out. They didn't tell me their full plan.
So after approximately 9 hours in the interrogation room, Carrie was finally allowed to leave with her dad and her brother. And, you know, she was only 16 years old. I think it would have been a different story if she was an adult because although she didn't have any intentions of these guys coming in to kill her mum, she was still an accomplice to murder. You know, she let the murderers into her house. But at the same time, you know, she's a 16-year-old girl and she didn't expect these guys to come and kill her mum. She just wanted to scare her. And she couldn't even explain why Zayn killed her in the end. She doesn't even know what happened that made him take it that step further and just, you know, if he got caught up in the heat of the moment, whatever it was, she couldn't even explain why he decided to do that. So Zayn Ahmed was arrested later that evening and he was brought in for questioning at the sheriff's office.
Now you know who Carrie is?
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, what's y'all's relationship?
I thought we was friends, you know, and I'm just gonna be curious what did I do? I have not done nothing to her.
When's the last time you seen her?
Seen her? Since, like, what? Like, I ran into her at the mall, like, way back.
When he was confronted with the allegations, he was so confused. He said that he had never been to Carrie's house before. He didn't even know what her house looked like. He said that he certainly wasn't there the night before. He had been at home with his family all evening.
She said you came by our house last night.
I was at home all night last night. I didn't go anywhere. I was at home. I'd never been to Carrie's house. I'm telling you the truth, sir. I haven't been to her house.
I don't even think they had told him at this point that Maryanne had been murdered because he was just so confused why he was even in the police office, like being questioned. He said he hadn't done anything to Carrie or her family that would warrant being arrested. And while he did admit to having short-term memory, he was sure that he had never been to Carrie's house. When they brought up the fact that Carrie had said that he was her stalker, he said that he certainly wasn't. He didn't know where she lived, like I said, didn't even know who her mum was. And then when they told him that Maryanne had been murdered, he was so caught off guard, he was so confused. And he told police that he believed that somebody was framing him. Police interrogated him for about 7 hours, and the whole time he completely denied having any involvement, any knowledge even of this murder, and even consented to a polygraph test to prove his innocence. But when the polygraph results came back, it showed that he was hiding something. So they go back, they take him back to the interview room and they tell him, your polygraph results are showing that you're lying to us. And this is when he just cracked. After denying it for the last 7 hours, he did a complete 180 and he told them that he did in fact murder Maryanne Murphy. He told detectives that he had been contacted by Carrie and that she had asked him to do a favor.
She contacted me and said, hey, can you do me a favor? I'm like, yeah, what's up? She's like, can you scare my mom? I'm like, yeah, sure.
Did she say why she wanted her mom scared?
No, sir. And so I got ready. I wore black, all black. I had a hoodie over my face so no one could see me. I had a weapon on me, but I wasn't going to use it. I was just going to scare her mom.
Both he and Carrie's stories actually matched up pretty closely. So what he said is that he agreed to help scare Carrie's mother, and he got dropped at Carrie's house by a friend just after 9 p.m. on the night of the murder. He said he'd been wearing all black. He also had a weapon on him that he didn't intend to use. He went to Carrie's window, knocked on it, and that's when Carrie let him into the house. So after she opened the door for him, he goes up to Maryanne's room. Maryanne jumps out of bed and she starts screaming and yelling, and he freaks out. He gets scared by her reaction, and in all of the commotion, he said that he accidentally stabs her. Couldn't remember how many times he stabbed her. He couldn't even remember where he stabbed her. He just said he remembers stabbing her once in the arm, once in the stomach, and once in the back, which is a lot different to the 73 stab wounds that she was actually found with. But after his chilling confession, he was subsequently arrested and charged with Maryanne's murder. Now, following his confession, this confession basically confirmed that, in Carrie's final version of events, she had been telling the truth, but this meant that she was essentially an accomplice to her mother's murder. So she was brought in for further questioning. And before we get into all of that, I want to just tell you a little bit about Carrie Murphy and the person that she was. Her friends describe her as having a strong personality, and one of them actually described her as possessive, which they meant in an endearing way. So I think she was, a little possessive about her friends. She didn't want anyone to steal her friends away from her, that sort of thing. She attended Chester W. Nimitz Senior High School, and it was here that she participated in the choir. Her appearance and her self-image were really a sore spot for her because she grew to be a lot taller than her classmates, and so she was quite insecure. She stood out from everybody else, and in an effort to fit in, she began wearing a lot more makeup and dressing differently. She wasn't an outsider by any means. She definitely had a group of friends at school. So when she was younger, she was pretty close with her mum, but as she got older, she started to rebel and they started to drift apart. Carrie was acting out, she was smoking, she was sneaking out, and she was basically just kind of going a bit wild and just doing whatever she wanted to, which is obviously not something any parent wants for their child. And so Maryanne started trying to discipline her, doing what she thought was best for her. She would ground her, she would take her phone off her, that sort of thing. And that was really the position that they were in when Maryanne was murdered. So they were just kind of fighting and bickering a lot, as parents do when their kids are in their teen years. I mean, what kid did not fight with their parents when they were in school? You know what I mean? But Maryanne was really just trying to do the best thing that she could for her kid, and she was trying to make sure that she didn't go down a bad path. So when Carrie was brought in for more questioning, she basically wanted to take back everything she had told the police up until this point, but she realized it was obviously too late for that, and so she asked for a lawyer. Carrie Murphy was then actually charged with the murder of her mother, Maryanne Murphy. And this was such a shock to her dad and her brother because they were completely convinced that she was innocent. They really struggled to wrap their heads around this because, I mean, imagine finding out that your sister or your daughter has murdered their mum in cold blood. All teenagers have their issues and their arguments with their parents, but this was just so out of left field. Anna Emmons, a juvenile prosecutor for Harris County, was assigned to the case. She had a look at what Carrie had said, and although Zayn wasn't a minor, she also had a look at what he had said because, Carrie, he was involved with Carrie, who was a minor. Besides the point, as she was looking into Zayn's confession, she kind of realized there were parts of his story that didn't make sense. For example, in his confession, he says that Carrie let him in through the front door, but this went directly against what Carrie had said, that she had let them in through the back door. And this was just one minor discrepancy, right? Zayn just kind of seemed clueless the whole time during his confession about what he was actually confessing to. So he told detectives that when or after Carrie let him in, he went upstairs to Maryanne's bedroom where he carried out the murder. And the issue with this is that the Murphy household was a one-story household. There were no stairs for him to go up to. It really seemed like he had never been to the house, which is what he was originally claiming. In that 7 hours of interrogation where he was denying the whole thing, he was saying, I have never been to that house. I don't even know where they live. I don't even know who Maryanne is. He also said that he stabbed Maryanne 4 times, which is a big difference to the 73 times that she was actually stabbed. And then the whole thing was even more bizarre because detectives had 2 different stories of how Carrie and Zayn actually knew each other. According to Carrie, Zayn was her stalker. According to Zayn, they were kind of friends, but not really close friends. And then if they're not close friends, why would he agree to come and do this and scare her mum? And then for some reason, during this time scaring her mum, he ends up murdering her by stabbing her 73 times, which is a very passionate, very hateful way to murder somebody. So when police caught wind of all of these inconsistencies in his confession, it was pretty obvious to them that he was lying about some of these things. But the big question was why? Zayn's interrogation as well, like his whole confession is crazy to listen to. At some points it seems like he doesn't even actually know what he's saying and what he's confessing to. Like right after he confesses to the murder, he asks them if he can start again and says, I'm going to tell you the truth this time.
I want to start over everything right now.
Okay.
So when he starts again and he's telling them the truth now, he says that he didn't go anywhere on Sunday night. He never left the house, and his family would be able to vouch for this and confirm that he had never left the house, so he couldn't have committed this murder.
Okay, you're losing me. What time did you go over Carrie's house then?
I didn't go to Carrie's house. My brother, my dad, everybody in my family can tell you I was at home all day that Sunday. I didn't go anywhere. And this is the truth. I'm just scared right now. I'm really scared.
Then it seems he changes his story again because they ask him where he stabbed Maryanne, and he's like, I don't really know where I stabbed her. So he basically keeps flipping between saying he did do it and he didn't do it, and it's honestly just one of the most bizarre things I have ever seen.
Do you really remember how many times and where you stabbed her? You just don't want to tell me?
I don't remember how many times I stabbed her.
Also, there's no evidence against him. There's no evidence to actually prove that he did this. So the only thing police have against him is his confession, which they're now starting to question. They don't know whether he did it or not, right? They still have this confession. They still have him under arrest. They're still like, he did it, but he's not telling us the truth is kind of where they're at the moment. Maybe him and Carrie just kind of hadn't gotten their story on the same page. So police are looking into people that know Carrie, that know Zayn, that know Maryanne, and they're trying to get to the bottom of what the truth is. As they go through Maryanne's phone, they find out that she was actually having an affair with one of her co-workers. So in this whole investigation, this evidence that she was having an affair is pretty much the first piece of evidence that would actually suggest a motive. So police obviously go and speak with the secret lover, and he said that there was no way that Don had any idea that Maryanne was cheating on him because Maryanne had been spending a lot of time away from the house because she didn't want to be around Don while he was drunk. So police, of course, start toying around with theories of a love triangle, of Don finding out about the affair and murdering Maryanne. But ultimately, both Don and the secret lover had alibis. These alibis were confirmed and they were ruled out as suspects. But while investigators were speaking to Don, he suggested that they go and speak to somebody named Rebecca Keller, whose friends referred to her as Bunny. So Rebecca and Carrie had been seeing each other. Rebecca was actually 4 years older than Carrie. So the two of them met at school choir when Carrie was 15 and Rebecca was 19. And Carrie's brother Scott knew about the relationship and he said that the two of them fell in love. Obviously, a very questionable relationship because the two of them met when Carrie was 15 years old and Rebecca was 19 years old, and their relationship was very full on right from the get-go. They just became obsessed with each other. When Maryanne found out that her 15-year-old daughter was dating a 19-year-old, she was not happy. And on top of the age gap, she really noticed a change in Carrie's behavior from when she started dating Rebecca. Maryanne did everything that she could to try and stop this relationship. She banned Rebecca from coming to their home. She confiscated Carrie's phone so that she wouldn't be able to talk to Rebecca anymore. At one point, Maryanne actually found Rebecca and Carrie in the shower together, and this was after Rebecca had already been banned from the house. It was never confirmed what was going on in that shower, so I want to reserve judgment without knowing the facts. I want to believe that they were just hiding in there so that Maryanne wouldn't find them, but it's definitely a bit suspicious. The restrictions that Maryanne was trying to impose were kind of just making everything more hostile between Carrie and herself, and it was also, I guess, bringing Carrie and Rebecca even closer. At one point, Rebecca came to the house and Maryanne told her she had to leave, and she outright refused. So Maryanne called the police and Rebecca was arrested for trespassing. Because of this, the police actually did know about Rebecca, but they had never questioned her in this investigation because her name had never come up and they already had this confession from Zayn. But now that Don has said, you should really go and speak to Rebecca, that's exactly what the police do. They go and speak to her, and she was super forthcoming during their investigation, during their questioning. They didn't even bring her into the station. They just questioned her at her house, and she told detectives that the relationship between her and Carrie had just kind of fizzled out, that they weren't dating anymore, but they were still friends, and that they hadn't spoken since a month before the murder. She was unable to provide any clarity on the situation with the home invasion and why Maryanne was murdered, but she assured them that she wasn't involved in any capacity.
So you don't have any idea why this happened?
No, sir, I don't.
And you telling me the truth in what you're telling me?
Yes. Do I look like a bad kid?
No.
I'm a good kid.
Now, with the way that this investigation is going, obviously they're not just going to take her on her word, and police continue trying to get to the bottom of everything. They have so many conflicting stories, a random confession. They have so many moving parts in this case, and they're just trying to get to the bottom of what happened. So they're also trying to look for this phone, this second phone that a neighbor saw Carrie with, that she admitted that she had, and it was a secret phone that she had that Maryanne didn't know about. Turns out Scott had this phone all along. I don't think it was malicious or anything. I just think he didn't know that the police wanted it or that it was going to help with the investigation or anything. So when he found out, he hands the phone over willingly. And this is kind of when everything kind of starts to come together, right? All of the moving puzzle pieces start to come into place. Police find out that this phone is what Carrie calls the bunny phone, because it was actually given to her by Rebecca so that they could talk without Maryanne knowing. Because obviously Maryanne used to confiscate Carrie's phone a lot so that she couldn't talk to Rebecca. So when police look through this phone, they find out that Rebecca had lied to them. Their relationship certainly had not fizzled out. They certainly had not last spoken a month before the murder. They were in constant contact. So police bring Rebecca into the station for further questioning, and they tell her, we have this phone, we know you're still in contact, and she admits that she had lied to them in her initial interview. They also brought up with her the fact that they had combed through the phone records from this bunny phone that she had purchased for Carrie, and they found that Carrie had actually called her just after 1 a.m. The call lasted 3 minutes, and this was right before Carrie called 911 to report the home invasion. When investigators asked her about this is what she said.
She's like, something bad has happened and I really need you right now. I was like, okay, what happened? Tell me what happened. She's like, my mom has been killed. I was like, by who? She's like, I don't know, I'm really scared. Okay. I was like, okay, well, you need to call the cops. She's like, okay.
So that was basically Rebecca's story, that she knew Maryanne was dead, but she didn't know any of the details. She didn't know who did it, how it happened. She had no idea about anything except for what Carrie had told her on that phone call. She also told detectives that she had been at work at the time of the murder at a place called Joe's Crab Shack, so she couldn't have possibly, been involved. Police went to Joe's Crab Shack to confirm this alibi. When they get there, they find out she wasn't at work because they had fired her 2 months before the murder. I just think it's so absurd as well to make up a lie like that, because obviously police are going to try and confirm your alibi. If there's one thing police are going to do, it's confirm an alibi. But instead of confirming an alibi, they're just confirming that she has lied to them again and again and again. By the time they went to confirm her alibi, they'd already let her go from questioning. So after finding out that she had lied to them again, they brought her back in for a third round of questioning. So they tell her that they know her alibi is a lie, and, as everybody in this case has done again and again and again, she changed her story again. She told police that Carrie just really hated her mother and that they had been talking about it for weeks, and that Carrie had just been complaining about Maryanne constantly.
She started telling me, I've been planning this plan for 3 months, and I was like, what plan? She's like, I'm not going to get you involved. Her plan was to wait till her mom fell asleep. She was going to go in there with some knife And she told me, she's like, yeah, I want to stab my mom 28 times.
Rebecca claims that after Carrie said this, she hung up on her because she didn't want to hear anymore. She didn't want to be a part of this. And they didn't talk about it again until the night of the murder, when Carrie lets her know that she's going to go ahead with the plan. Supposedly, Rebecca asked to be left out of it, and she didn't hear from Carrie again until that phone call that lasted 3 minutes just after 1 a.m. when Carrie called her to say, I did it.
And she's like, I just did it. I was like, did what? She's like, I just killed my mom.
Rebecca went into detail, telling detectives exactly what Carrie had confessed to her on the phone.
She started telling me like how she did it. She's like, I stabbed my mom 17 times. I slit her throat.
She claims that she told Carrie to call the police immediately and turn herself in, but that Carrie didn't want to do that and she wanted to try and cover it up.
I told her, I was like, you need to like call the cops and tell them that you did do it. And she's like, no, I'm gonna cover it up.
So after Rebecca's confession, police, they don't want to take any chances because at this point, everyone has just been lying to them and changing their stories again and again and again. So they asked Rebecca to take a polygraph test, which she does, and she actually passes her polygraph test. Her results came back indicating that she was telling the truth. But as I'm sure you guys can imagine, that is not where this story ends. The real breakthrough in the case came when detectives talked to one of Rebecca's friends, a guy named Martin Juarez. He told them that Rebecca had asked him to do her a favor and he agreed. And basically that favor was she wanted him to drive her to a house, drop her off there, wait there for 20 minutes and she would come back. So he did that. He drives her to Carrie's neighborhood. He sits in the car and he waits. It actually was an hour before she came back. And he said that when she came back to the car, she like runs in, gets in the car and she's like, go, go, go. And she looked completely exhausted. He also told police that in the weeks following the incident, he tried to confront her about what had happened. They met up in a park and he was just asking her like, what went down? Why did we have to leave in such a hurry? Why did you look so exhausted? And she basically broke down and confessed to him what had happened that night. According to Martin, Rebecca had confessed to the murder of Maryanne Murphy. At this point, this case just has so many twists and turns. I mean, there's so many different stories from so many different people. Was Rebecca just trying to throw her girlfriend under the bus? Was Carrie involved in the murder at all? And literally, what did Zayn have to do with any of this? So with this new information, Rebecca is arrested for the murder of Maryanne Murphy. And at the sheriff's office after her arrest, she finally confesses to being involved or being at the house when the murder took place. She basically told detectives that she just loved Carrie so much that she allowed Carrie to convince her to involve herself in her plan to murder her mum, but she was still adamant that she didn't kill Maryanne, that was all Carrie, and that while she was there when the murder took place, she was merely an accessory. She alleged that it was her job to basically help Carrie clean up and also to write that ridiculous note that implicated the guy from the car accident. She also said that on Carrie's request, she took a garbage bag filled with evidence. She took it to the school where they had met and she left the garbage bag there. And when she left the house with that garbage bag, that was the end of her involvement. According to Rebecca, Carrie stayed back at the house cleaning for hours before she finally called 911, and that's why Maryanne's blood was already drying by the time police arrived at the scene. So following this new confession, Rebecca was charged with murder and she was being held at the Harris County Jail.
Prosecutors charged both girls with murder and Keller with child sexual abuse for having sexual contact with her 16-year-old accomplice on or around the night of the murder, July 16, 2012.
As for Zayn, his charges were later dropped because prosecutors actually found video evidence of him being at home on the night of the murders. I do not understand why Carrie involved him. Zayn is adamant that he didn't stalk her. He was never even interested in her romantically. And it's really, really sad because he was just so terrified. He had been questioned for 7 hours at that point, right? He'd been interrogated for 7 hours and he was just so scared that he literally confessed to a murder that he did not commit. A murder that he had less than nothing to do with. That is literally the end of his involvement in this case. Like, he had nothing to do with this murder at all. That's why he was so confused when he was first brought in by police about this murder. He's like, I don't even know who Maryanne is. I don't even know where Carrie lives. I don't know who her mum is. He had no idea that her mum had died. And then when they told him, he was like, what? Like, what would I have to do with that? I just think it's so sad that he was so scared. Like, he just randomly got thrown into this by this this girl, and he was so scared that he confessed to a murder he had nothing to do with. So it was ultimately decided that Carrie should be charged as an adult for this crime, but she was granted bail while awaiting trial. Her brother Scott paid her bail and allowed her to stay with him because I guess he just really didn't want to believe that she was capable of murdering their mother. Unfortunately, following Maryanne's death, Don's mental health began deteriorating significantly, and he began drifting further and further away from the man his children knew. Scott felt like he was all alone, but still he was gracious enough to welcome his sister into his home despite what she had allegedly done. He was determined to get a straight answer from her, and he would ask her all the time what happened, and her answer was always the same, that Zayn had done it, which Scott knew wasn't true. He knew that Rebecca had been arrested now, but I think he was trying to rationalize in his head that maybe if it wasn't Zayn, it was Rebecca, that his sister couldn't have possibly killed their mum. Carrie's friends recall that while she was out on bail, she was very blasé about the whole thing. She didn't seem upset at all that her mum was dead. She didn't seem concerned by the fact that she had spent time in jail or that she was up for a murder charge. She just seemed very like she had moved on. Also, while she's out on bail, Rebecca is in jail, and despite the fact that they have a no contact order, they were talking constantly. They were always on the phone, professing their love for each other, saying they couldn't wait to be together and return to their old lives once this all blew over. I mean, these girls are just so not on planet Earth. They are so far removed from reality and from what's going on. They're facing murder charges, and they're like, oh, I just can't wait for this whole thing to blow over. So during Rebecca's third interview, she admitted to police that she knew that Maryanne had confiscated Carrie's phone, and she was really concerned about what Maryanne might have found on the phone. Prosecutors believed that this was a driving factor in the motive for the murder, that if there was any kind of nude photo on there, Maryanne could report Rebecca to the police and she would be charged with statutory rape. Rebecca all but admitted that these photos existed, so this was really determined to have been their motive. You know, Carrie really hated her mum and they really saw Maryanne as an obstacle in their relationship. In the lead up to the trial, prosecutors were really trying to pin down exactly what the story is because they had stories from Rebecca, stories from Carrie. They're both kind of blaming each other. They also had Zayn's confession, which we know isn't true, but it could put some doubt into the jury's mind. The defense could use that to their advantage. So prosecutors are really just trying to hone in their case and they're trying to pinpoint exactly what happened because they don't actually know if it was Carrie's idea. They don't know who actually murdered Maryanne, if it was Carrie or if it was Rebecca. The prosecutor assigned to the case, a man named Greg Holton, actually believed that Carrie had more power in the relationship and therefore she was likely the one who came up with the idea to murder her mother. And then, believe it or not, it was actually the stupidity of both Rebecca and Carrie that prosecutors found out what actually took place on the night of the murder and who actually committed the murder. So like I said, they had been talking on the phone all the time while Rebecca was in jail and Carrie was out on bail. And in one of these phone calls, they actually just fully talk about what happened. For the 14 months that Rebecca was in jail and Carrie was on bail, the two girls spoke more than 800 times, and law enforcement was listening to all of these phone calls, obviously. I think eventually they must have just forgotten that they were being recorded and that law enforcement could listen to all of these phone calls because Rebecca is still in jail. And it is actually sickening how they talk about what they did.
You have no idea what it's like not having your mom and having nobody but your brother to depend on.
It's not your fault. Stop blaming yourself for it. Things happen for a reason, babe. You can't change the way that God does his way.
For the most part, they actually did pretty well at not incriminating themselves, but eventually came the moment that law enforcement had been waiting for.
You didn't see what I saw that night.
Actually, I did.
In person.
Actually, I did.
What do you mean you did?
I wasn't in my room the whole time.
What do you mean?
I wasn't in my room the whole time.
Then, where were you the entire time?
The doorway.
Doorway of what?
My mom's room.
No, you weren't, because you weren't there. I didn't see you.
We won't talk about that.
Oh my God, babe. Don't tell me you saw. I thought I told you to stay in your room.
I know. but I'm hard-headed.
So there you have it. It was Rebecca Keller who held the knife while Carrie presumably watched on and helped with the cleanup. When Carrie's brother Scott heard about the confession, he was devastated. I think he always knew in the back of his mind that his sister was guilty, but he just really didn't want to believe it. He wanted to believe that it was Rebecca, that it was someone else, that his sister couldn't have done that to their mum. I think there was some relief knowing that it wasn't actually his sister who held the knife, but it was still a really awful realization, right? And he was the one who actually convinced his sister to take a plea deal, which she reluctantly did. Rebecca Keller also took a plea deal, but she was still somehow pointing the finger at Carrie. She was sentenced to 60 years in prison, and she basically said that she had been manipulated by Carrie and by drugs.
But you knew that you could get in big trouble.
I knew, yes.
Right? Statutory rape.
Yes.
Right? Child sexual abuse.
Yes.
You were committing those crimes.
Right.
So, in order to avert child sexual abuse charge, you turned to murder.
Yes.
Carrie Murphy was sentenced to 30 years in prison, a sentence which took into the account the fact that she hadn't actually been the one holding the knife. Her relationship with Scott was obviously very severely impacted by this, which is also another very sad thing to this because Scott lost his mum, and although he's still amicable with his sister, they really don't talk much anymore. And so he kind of lost his sister as well, and they were always really close growing up. Scott has gone on to get married. He's had 2 kids, which is honestly really great for him that he was able to go on and live kind of a normal life and escape the troubles that have followed him for so long. Donna's also still alive and living in a care facility, but his mental state has deteriorated so much that he still thinks Maryanne is alive. Maryanne Murphy is remembered as a beautiful soul that deserves to be remembered for her kind personality and her commitment to her family. She was a beacon of light to those around her, and that's the Maryanne that should be commemorated. But that's everything for this case. That's all from me today, guys. I will be in the comments to chat to you guys about all of your thoughts and your opinions on this case. But that's everything. That's all from me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.